There's 9 coverages that your insurance may not cover. We're going to go over those right now, and we're going to talk and discuss and explain what those scenarios are. Sometimes some of these can be covered. Let's describe those so we know that when you're purchasing your car insurance policy, what you can expect. If you guys are shopping for different car insurance, definitely follow the link below. There is an option to do a quote with multiple companies. Let me know if you're interested or just have general questions. Let's get into the first one, which is comprehensive. We're actually talking about a deer claim. If you hit a deer or hit an animal, there's scenarios where this is and isn't covered. It's laid out pretty simple. Is comprehensive is the name of it. That covers theft, vandalism if you hit an animal, which is deer. A lot of people hear the word full coverage. It's honestly a made-up word. We use it all the time because that's what people think the word is, and it's the most common word used. But comprehensive is not just the full coverage piece. There's 3 pieces. You've got your liability, which we'll talk about in a moment. We've got comprehensive, which is what we're talking about now, and then we have collision. Typically, all of that together is what people call full coverage, to where you're fully covered. But there's a lot of different video. There's exclusions to that, which we can talk about a little bit later. Personal property in your car is also not covered. So if you don't have a home or a renter's policy, you may not have that covered. Now, there are scenarios where you can add like stereo equipment, valuables. It used to be CDs, if you still have those, that kind of died off on that coverage because it's not common anymore. But some companies still offer media or CDs that you can cover up to, I think, $500 on that policy, and different upgrades. If you've added customizations to the car, that is personal property because it doesn't really add to the value or add to the replacement cost of the vehicle. In that scenario, most of the time your homeowner's insurance, if you had a laptop sitting in the car and it was stolen, then your home policy would kick in, or your renter's policy would kick in and pay that property damage claim. So if you've ever left your window open, you are in the same boat as a lot of people, and that actually is not typically covered. If you left your window open and it starts to rain, that is something that can be considered negligent. For not knowing that it was something that you could shut, whatever the case is. It's kind of that gray area. Some companies will and some companies won't. You can fight it, and a lot of the times you can win that claim. So just know there's a little bit of an asterisk on that piece, to where that is sometimes a piece that an insurance adjuster will say, yep, that's fine. There was no call for rain. It started raining, blah, 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 blah. Most of the time, and in a lot of cases, it can get denied because it could be considered negligent for leaving the windows open. You're walking away from the car, you left the windows open, someone gets in it, steals it. It's just part of what could happen. If it rains, that same scenario. That's where I'd love to hear some comments, and let me know in the comment below if you've ever seen that scenario, heard of it, or have had it yourself. Let us know what the outcome was at, because that is, like I said, a gray area. I'd be curious to see if anybody actually had that covered or denied on their policy. A broken window because you left your key in the car, and that's not likely going to be covered. You unfortunately locked your key in the vehicle. They might cover a locksmith if you have the towing and labor. It usually comes with lockout service, and there's a limit to it, so just know that some of these fancy keys, these $800 keys, are not fully covered. You might only have $100, and in most cases, if you have a better policy, you're going to have $500. I believe mine is a full replacement, so it doesn't matter what the key is or what it costs. It's just going to replace that key fob. They got to program it, do whatever the case is. If I lock my key in it, I'm going to have that service rendered. If I break the window to get the key out, then in that scenario, I chose to break the window. That is not going to be a covered occurrence. I've had a few people comment on my videos and ask, well, what happens if my car breaks down? Insurance is not for that. Insurance is not for wear and tear, mechanical breakdown. That's something that you would purchase on a separate policy. That's called a warranty. If you want an extended warranty for an older vehicle, you're going to pay a cost for that. Just be very careful. I'm not an expert in this, but I do know that I've seen a lot of people buy the warranties that exclude certain scenarios. I know from experience that having the powertrain warranty is powerful. Make sure there's no exclusions to that policy, because you want to make sure that they're not excluding major parts that commonly happen to your vehicle. Side hustles, everybody does them. Not covered. A lot of people think it is. There is an additional coverage that you may purchase depending on your side hustle. If your side hustle is delivering food for Uber Eats, or you're doing a rideshare program where you're driving people around for Uber, then that's a different scenario. Whether it's Lyft or delivering food, you got to be very careful. I actually have a video that goes over that here if those are the scenarios. To summarize it, if you're doing any type of driving Uber, Lyft, driving people, most insurance companies will offer what's called a rideshare program. That's the name of it. Just tell them you have people in your car and you need rideshare. Usually adds about $100 to $200 a year to your policy, and it covers the liability of when that person is in your car. So your normal insurance will stop the moment that someone gets in your car, and your Uber or your Lyft insurance will kick in. You drive the person there, they get out of the car, and your normal insurance will kick in. Even though you're on the clock. If you're off the clock, it doesn't matter, you're fine. Your normal insurance is just your normal insurance. But if they know that you're logging into the app and you're an employee of Uber or Lyft or whatever the case is, then once you log into your app, whether you're standing outside, if someone stole my car and I watched them steal it, but I was logged into my app waiting for a job, my normal insurance won't cover that scenario. You have to purchase a rideshare program. This is common across the board. Household members that regularly drive your vehicle. This isn't a gray area. This is a black and white. However, this is an area that claims do get paid. It's kind of weird. I said it's not a gray area. Let's explain. So if you regularly have a family member or a friend that drives your vehicle, and regularly means once every couple months, couple times a year. That's regular to insurance. In most people's thoughts, if they're driving once a week, once, twice a month, whatever the case is, that's regular use. Normally, insurance says you have to insure the car at your house. So if you park your house there every night, your friend could technically borrow it every single day, as long as it was parked and garaged at the normal location on the commonality. However, if that person does borrow your car constantly, you're required to put them on your policy as a driver. Now, if they have their own insurance, that may help you to where you may not have to add them on into the listed driver. Talk to your agent and make sure, but in most cases, they're okay with that. Most common question I get is, if I rent a car, does my car insurance cover the rental? Most of the time, and I would say 95% of the time, check your policy, make sure it's correct. Yes, they'll cover the liability of the rental, and they'll cover the collision and comprehensive of the rental up to your limits. So if you have low liability limits and high deductibles, then you may want to purchase the rental car insurance with that policy. In my case, I actually have a pretty decent plan, so my deductible would just default to that vehicle. There is a piece that your insurance doesn't cover at all, and that's loss of use. If you damage the car and whatever the deductible was, $500, you paid it, you're good, that's getting fixed. If it takes 3 weeks for that car to get repaired, that's 3 weeks that they don't earn income. So they could ask you to pay that additional loss of use or loss of rent, as they call it, and you're responsible for that. Your insurance won't cover the loss of rent in any scenario that I've ever seen. For those of you that are in the United States, which hopefully all of you are when you're watching my channel, they don't cover out of the US. If you take your car into Canada, Mexico, whatever the case is, there's a little bit of an asterisk I'm going to give you, because once you're in Texas-ish area, a lot of companies actually offer for Texas residents 50 miles into Mexico. So there are some asterisks or some areas where they're going to allow you. So if that's the case, then ask. But in most any other case, if you go outside of the US, the insurance doesn't follow. It follows you in the US. So if I drive from New York to California to Florida to whatever state I'm in, inside the US, you're good. But if you drive outside of the US, you don't typically have coverage for that. Let's see who's got the fastest car. Not covered. If you're caught racing, or if you are racing, or if you're legally doing it on a track, it doesn't matter. It's just not covered. They don't cover racing. Some classic car companies or race car companies, like your Haggerty's and your different companies that do that type of policy, then sure, that's fine. You can add a coverage for that. But in every other case scenario, your normal insurance policy won't cover racing. Same thing if you're driving illegally or for an illegal activity. DUIs and that are different scenarios. Like, that's technically not supposed to be doing it. And if it happens, you get in an accident. A lot of times your insurance will pay those scenarios. But if you're actually driving for a heist or driving for an illegal activity, mainly for something you're negligent for, you're doing it on purpose, that is not going to be covered on any insurance policy. If it's someone stole your car and did it, that's a different scenario. Then yes, that would be covered under your typical insurance. Hopefully you get the car back, and hopefully it's not smelling like smoke. And just, I've had a lot of scenarios where those actually have happened. In the last piece we mentioned before, I know this is like 12 and we said 9, but there was extra parts, your car additional equipment. Some companies cover some additional equipment. If it's a motorcycle, that's a different story. If you have, usually they're built in a $3,500-ish to that policy. But for car insurance, unless it's beyond the stereo, sometimes they give you an extra $1,000 for the stereo depending on your policy. If you add a lift, if you add a additional equipment, a $5,000 paint job or a set of rims that is $3,000, whatever the case is, those additional equipment need to be noted to the insurance company. They have to have the underwriter approve them, and some companies actually just automatically approve them and have an additional coverage to where you can just pick the custom equipment. Say I have $8,000 worth of customizations, they say, great, $8,000 of extra equipment, and it raises your price X amount of dollars, $10, $20, whatever the case is. So make sure if you do have that, it is covered if they're aware of it and approve it. It's not covered if it's not listed and known. And those are the whatever ways that car insurance does not cover different scenarios. I hope this was helpful. If you want to learn more about the actual coverages, here's my Insurance 101. It should be very helpful to help you decide what type of coverages and limits that you should carry. Let me know in the comments below if you have questions. Otherwise, I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.